Hey y'all, before we get into today's episode, I want to give you a heads up that we're talking about some sensitive but important topics related to substance use, specifically alcohol. If that's something that's heavy for you right now, feel free to take a pause or come back when you're in a space to listen. Our guest brings incredible insight and heart to this conversation, and we're approaching it with care, compassion, and a lot of clarity because this is real life and it matters. But thanks for being here and taking care of yourself in the process. This is Gen Z, a podcast that explores Generation Z, who they are, how they're different from other generations, while also being an incredible blend of those who came before them. We explore what they think is cool, what moves them, and why they do what they do. I'm your host, Meghan Grace. So let's talk about social culture for a minute, specifically what it looks like when we take alcohol out of the equation. More and more, as we've seen throughout this season, Gen Z is rewriting the norms around how we connect, celebrate, and take care of ourselves. Whether it's sober curiosity, wellness priorities, or wanting better option, the shift is real. And this intentional choice among Gen Z is shaping everything from nightlife to branding and to what's in our fridge. So what's filling in on that gap? For many, it's THC beverages or alcohol alternative options in general. Today's guest is someone who's helping shape the culture of how we gather around drinks. Todd Harris is a brand and cultural strategist and the co-founder of Plift, a THC-infused beverage designed to offer flavorful, approachable alternative to alcohol. He's also behind Perfectly Dosed, a company supplying high-quality cannabinoid emulsions for others entering the cannabis beverage space. But Todd's not just here as a brand builder. He's also someone in recovery who understands firsthand what it means to seek more inclusive, intentional social experiences that are not solely defined by alcohol consumption. We talk about how Gen Z is redefining the role of substances in our life, what it takes to build a values-driven brand, and why creating space for real choice matters now more than ever. So very excited, as I always am, because this is just a fun part of my job is that I get to spend time with cool people and learn about their story. And that is no exception for today. Excited to welcome Todd Harris to the conversation. Todd, welcome. Excited to have you here.
Hi, Megan. Nice to be here. And I will say cool is in air quotes. I don't know how cool I am. It depends on who you ask. We'll give you my level of coolness, but I'll take it.
Okay, so I think that because you don't think you're cool, and I also sometimes don't think I'm cool, we're actually probably very cool, and we just maybe are too humble to accept it.
Someone somewhere appreciates our coolness. How about that?
And I know who that someone is, and we have to give her a shout out. Ella Parlor, if you're listening, which I know you are, we think you're very cool, and thank you for letting us be friends because of you. So
agreed.
And actually, Ella might be the coolest of all of us.
Also agreed.
Yes, this is going to be a good conversation because we agree on one thing, that Ella's great. But Todd, I didn't bring you here to just talk about Ella, as much fun as that would be, because she's a delight. But can you tell me a little bit about your story? Who are you? What is it that you do now? And a little bit of the journey of how you got here.
Yeah, so, I mean, in a nutshell, I'm what I will call a cultural strategist. I love the idea of what gets people in culture excited about things in culture, right? So I spent a lot of my life, in music, in brand. I'm a sneakerhead by trade. And, I tend to think that I am cool, especially in front of my teenage daughters, right? But how I got to founding Plift is actually a really interesting life story. I don't shy away from this at all. The fact that I'm an alcoholic in recovery. And a lot of times you don't realize you're an alcoholic until you realize you're an alcoholic, right? You've had people telling you in so many ways, shapes, and forms that maybe you have an issue, but you shy away from that. And it's never your problem. It's always their problem, right? But roughly 4 or 5 years ago, I really started to have, long, hard conversations with myself around, why do I drink? Why, what was in it for me? And what I started to realize, especially coming out of COVID, was I'm social by nature, but I used to use social settings as a reason to get drunk. And so as I started to understand that, I was able to start to put my thumb on like, okay, what does it look like to do dry January? Can you actually make it to dry January? And the first few times I tried it, it was damp January. And then as I got further and further into it, I realized like, oh, wait, I can do this. And one of the big trigger points for me, Megan, was I was losing productivity. Every single day, every single week, I would go and I would travel for work. And whether I was having one drink or 10 drinks, I would be waking up later. And that means like 15 hours a week was getting lost because I wasn't popping out of bed, hitting my workout and getting into my day. I was, laying in bed right before my first call. Right. And so I started to think through my own journey and like the problem I wanted to solve or the problem we wanted to solve in our business. The flip side of that was, we started to look at the trends of, alcohol, beverage alcohol in general, and just, waning consumer sentiment around drinking, especially the younger generation. The further you get from like Gen X, which I am, the steeper decline you see. But you also had this really interesting rise in the socialization or the need to socialize cannabis consumption, right? I'm from the dare, generation. Keep kids off drugs. Dare, it's bad. Which, yeah, there are drugs that are very bad, right? But cannabis is just not one of them as far as I'm concerned. And so, my partner Glenn and I looked at each other and we just said, look, the need to socialize cannabis consumption is coming, right? Smoking joints or vapes are not inherently social. Taking a gummy is not social at all, right? You take a gummy and you wait for the impact. And then, 45 minutes, an hour later, all of a sudden you're high. And so we started to look at each other and said, look, the way the vehicle to socialize consumption is through a traditional ritual, which is drinking, right? This motion, whether it be a coffee, whether it be a beer, whether it be a wine, whether it be a soda, whatever it is, across the globe, that is the universal sign of socialization, right? And so we just said, like, let's lean into that and let's create something that allows people to socialize, give them an experience that they're looking for without the harmful effects of alcohol.
First, I want to appreciate you so much for being so willing to share about your recovery journey. I know everyone's journey is different and everyone's motivation is different. And I'm thank you for sharing that and just like an honest and vulnerable take with that. I think that's always helpful. And I love that you've channeled so much of your own journey, but like the deep reflection as well that you've experienced through that. And you're absolutely right. This idea of like, everyone's like, we gather around food. That's true. We do gather around food, but like once the meal ends, sometimes we're just still sitting and we want to gather, or sometimes we want to gather between meal times. And so I think that it's a really astute observation of like the desire to still connect over a beverage, whatever that beverage looks like. And I think that you need to give yourself nod to being more cool if you're a cultural strategist. I do think that that's arguably like one of the coolest things a person could be, in my mind. That it's really interesting to see how you've shaped your own journey, shaped your own reflection into something that is allowing a new kind of culture of gathering. And that's been a big part of what we've talked about this season on this podcast is how younger generations are gathering differently. They're getting together for different things that I'm like, I would have never got together with my friends to do that, but like, good for y'all.
Totally. Well, I mean, it's interesting. So like, shout out to my brother-in-law, Stephen Moore, who he's an alcoholic and he gave me the courage that I could do it. If I watched him do it and get into recovery and go 5-6 years, sober, I'm like, I could too. Right. So shout out to him, shout out to my sister who is also 2 years, without alcohol as of last month. Like all of us are doing this as a family and we're doing it together. But I think your insight around like how people are gathering is a very real one. One of the big cultural trends from Gen Z in particular right now is what we call day parties. Right. But really where these day parties exist is not at bars per se, or not at clubs per se, but at coffee shops, right? The phenomenon of like, we were just part of one in Kansas City this past weekend. It's called AM Club. And, at once a month on Saturdays, they pick out a killer coffee shop in town. DJs come and it's coffee, maybe some light beers or whatever, some beers, some wines, but THC beverages are being sampled out and poured like right? And it's like such a different environment for the socialization that our generation is not necessarily used to, right? It used to be
Yeah.
brunch, or it used to be a nighttime event.
So it's interesting you say that. We're featuring some of our friends at Eventbrite talking exactly at that of coffee clubbing and soft clubbing. So I did not pay Todd to give us a promo into that, but we are going to dive much further into the daytime party, but also like reconnecting with what a party actually means. And it's not just like I'm partying to, use substances and forget about my life. It's a very different mindset. And I'll be the first to say, I grew up in the millennial 2010s era of party life. It was a different world. Now I love to go to bed by like 9 o'clock. So you couldn't pay me to go out at night. But if you're like, would you like to come out to a little event that starts at 11 and ends at 1? I'll be like, sign me up.
Yeah, exactly.
Sign me up. I'll bring my SPF.
Yeah, exactly. The thought of being home by 6 is amazing.
Yeah, eating a full dinner, watching a movie before bed, amazing. So you've built some major brands, not just again, you're this cultural strategist, which is one of my favorite new job titles I've ever heard, for major brands like Gatorade and New Balance. And what are some of those lessons that you've learned along the way of working with some major brands like that into the company that you're currently helping Lift, and tell us a little bit more about what you'll do and how you're all growing, and get us kind of a little bit familiar with the product that you provide.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part first, then the second part second. So being close to brands like New Balance, Gatorade, Wendy's, like they all have very different products that they offer the world, but they're all very much in services of the world. And so what you quickly realize is like, what quote unquote problem do they typically solve for consumers, right? And when you're that close to brands that have that level of success, you start to think about everything through that lens. What is the actual problem I'm solving? Whether it's big or it's a small problem, what we tend to know is that a small problem is actually a big problem. It's just you're just looking at it through a pinhole, or vice versa. A big problem is actually a really small problem. You have to start to solve it one step at a time, right? And so like that way of thinking is how we apply that way of thinking to everything we do in Plift, right? Plift, the name of the business, is intentionally one letter short of the word uplift, because all that's missing is you. And when we talk about you, we talk about the collective you the can of curious, you the can of pro, you the sober curious, you the person looking for different and differentiated ways to socialize. Whoever you are, we want to meet you where you are in your journey with cannabis products and cannabis beverages in particular. And so that thinking of like, what is the problem to be solved, big or small, is how we set forth into the world. And so the first problem that we originally noticed like very quickly was there was two things. One was just the need and the desire for people to drink less, right? Like whether it was, hey, I want to have one less drink on a Saturday. Maybe I'm deciding not to drink during the week at all. Whatever it is, I want to drink less. The other was predictability and experiences around cannabis. So inherently, before we ever launched a product, we did some social polling of around 300, 400 people. Some we knew, some we didn't know. And we asked them some questions. And like when I tell people the questions we asked, they're like, dude, those are so random. But there was a method to the madness. And the questions we were asking are like, why do or don't you use cannabis products? If you did, what types of products would you use? What are your favorite happy hour cocktails? And people are like, why do you care? And that was starting to give us the insight of what products to build, right? And so the thing we noticed was that people did or didn't use cannabis products. They didn't use cannabis products. Number one reason was predictability. They had a poor experience before, and so therefore their entire thesis on cannabis is that my experience is going to mimic that, which is inherently not true, right? Like we talked about earlier, you take a gummy, a nibble of a gummy, a 10 milligram gummy, expecting to get 2.5 milligrams. Well, what we know in the industry is that gummies are inherently hard to dose. And so you may think you're getting 2.5 milligrams in that nibble where you're getting all 10 milligrams. And so you're waiting, I don't feel anything. And all of a sudden you feel everything. Poor experience. I'm not coming back for that. So we said, okay, can we create a more predictable experience? And the answer is yes. The other big insight we saw was that moms in particular, they were taking that nibble of a gummy right before school pickup to take the edge off. Right? This is coming out of COVID. The kids are just back to school. It's wild. It's crazy. They're masking. They're doing all these things. So can we take the edge off? I'm mom. Can I take the edge off? Okay, good. Noted. The second ritual, which still has not stopped, but it's declining, is that of once you get, home from practice, piano, whatever, you start making dinner. And what do you typically do? You pour a glass of wine. So then our thought was, can we connect those two rituals into one product type that services both? So that's when our Plift 4 milligram was born. It was meant to be a sessionable dose that could be consumed more like a cocktail and less like a vehicle to get someone intoxicated. And so that's when the product was born. And then the question about what are your favorite happy hour cocktails, in a world that's stigmatized, right? Cannabis is stigmatized, the DARE generation, this, that, and the other. We were like, can we create a familiar form factor, a 12-ounce can, and familiar flavor profiles modeled after classic cocktails? So like one of our early lines was Classic Vice Made Nice, right? And so our tart lime, inspired by the classic margarita, our crisp ginger, inspired by the Moscow Mule, our juicy grapefruit, inspired Paloma. How we landed on those three is in that survey, the top four happy hour cocktails: margarita, mule, actually old fashioned, and Paloma. So old fashioned, hard to replicate without the flavor of bourbon. So let's remove that and let's go citrus forward. So that's how we landed on those flavor profiles as our first flavor and the dosing. And since then, we've just evolved into a company that's a beverage company that's meeting consumer demand via form factors that they're asking for.
I'm fascinated. One, I love a data-driven moment. So the fact that you spent that much time really understanding the lifestyle of your potential consumers, I think is amazing. So a nod to your team and really listening to what people need and solving that problem. And I love the way that you frame it. Now that's going to be the thing I think about and talk about for like the week probably, is what problem are we solving? No matter how big or small. Like that's going to be my mantra this week. So thank you for that. I'd love to shift a little bit and think about the Gen Z of it all, right? Like that's the whole point of this podcast, and where I've been seeing this in some of my vantage point is that I've been studying Gen Z for over 10 years. My background's in higher education. I've done a pretty significant amount of work into data analytics around like students' consumption of alcohol and other drugs. And so I've been seeing this for a really long time. I've been seeing the shift in there's always going to be college students that drink, like that's a thing. But we're seeing the growth and the diversity of the way that people are gathering. We're seeing the growth and the diversity of the substances that they do use. And so I think there is this big reshaping and rethinking of drinking culture and substance use. But I would love to hear it from your perspective. You're a business owner, but you're also a dad of Gen Zers. So I know you have the conversations. You get the at-home case studies, I call it.
Oh, yeah.
And really, how is your company speaking to these changing values? And I have to imagine some of the data that you all collected spoke to that. But let's get into the Gen Z of it all and how y'all are connecting with this generation specifically.
Yeah, so it's super interesting. You kind of nailed it. When we started the company and we had this idea, at the time, my oldest daughter was 14. She's now a freshman in college. And she was in the back seat of the car, maybe in the front seat. I can't remember. She was in the car with me. And I turned to her and I asked her, I said, hey, Aves, what would you think if I drove to a dispensary right now? And because in Kansas City, licensed marijuana, recreational is legal. And her response, it didn't take her less than 1 second to respond. She had said, Dad, I would think nothing of it. You've been driving to liquor stores with me since I was a baby. And the light bulb went off that this generation does not think differently around intoxicants. Cannabis and alcohol, they're commingled. They don't see one. Well, actually, they do see one. They're actually starting to see alcohol as a much worse thing for them than actually cannabis is. And so that's when the light bulb went off to me, is like, we're building this drink and this beverage and this company for today's consumer, because it's pretty obvious that they're already, consumer types of all ages are pushing away. But what we're really building for is the next generation of consumers who are already telling you out loud, they're not even legal drinking age, and they're already telling you that alcohol is not for me. So So again, like to your point of, we're not all maybe asking for stone cold sobriety. We don't know. We don't have that data yet. But what we do know is that what we know they're asking for is alternatives to what has been a traditional way to unwind, which has been bev alcohol, right? And so like that's the insight we took, is like, we're just building something for tomorrow's generation. We're going to start by educating today's generation because they're the ones with the pocketbooks to go buy it. But when people ask me all the time, would I rather have my kids and their friends get loose in a case of High Noons or a case of Plift, it's always a case of Plift, not because I'm promoting underage use. That's not it at all. But the ramifications and what actually can happen to them are far more harmful when it's a case of High Noon than it is a case of 4 milligram THC drinks.
I'm gonna be honest, those High Noons will sneak up on you. They're so little.
Right now, as you're probably seeing on TikTok, is the Cutwater Challenge.
Oh, no, I don't go on TikTok. It scares me. It's a scary place for me. So
well, I don't use a ton of TikTok, but I'm kind of been forced to, because I don't have the time to do social media really at all. But if I want to connect with my kids, that's where I got to find them.
Yeah.
But I've been enamored by this TikTok challenge that is surrounding Cutwater, because Cutwater tastes great, doesn't taste like booze, and it's like 10%. So you're seeing
sneaking up on them. Yeah.
3 cans of Cutwater and they're out of there. And so there's this whole trend going on online. But in my mind, the whole time we thought as a company, like, we're building this thing for today's consumer, but we're really looking at tomorrow's consumer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that I'm getting deep into my thoughts because I've been thinking about this for multiple episodes about how this generation is gathering differently and socializing differently. And I think that they have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you see it every day, that this generation is, they came out of COVID and they said, let's maybe do things a little bit differently. And one of the things that I think they saw was the value of socializing on a deeper level, because the fact that we couldn't do that. And so I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the changes in how young people are getting together and how they're learning to socialize is different. I know when I was a young person of that age, it was, you went out to the party or you went out to the bar and you met people, and maybe you didn't drink that much, but like that's where people were. If you wanted to be. And I think that they're really challenging us to do that a little bit differently in the way that they're getting together and how they're getting together and what the activities that they're doing together might not always be conducive to a lifestyle that is really centered around traditional partying or traditional drinking or substance use in that regard. And so I think that what y'all are doing with I'm going to try to pronounce it correctly, Plift.
Yeah.
Crushed it.
You nailed it.
Is changing what a social drink looks like. And I would love to learn a little bit more about, I know that y'all are probably out in the community and seeing this, but how these alcohol-free beverages are changing not only the way young people are connecting, but how we as a society are connecting and gathering.
Yeah. So I think you're really touching on something that's interesting here, which is COVID. And what it did, right? Like, it forced everyone onto device. And now this younger generation is exhausted by devices. It's pretty interesting to see, like, an interesting phenomenon. You're seeing young kids, actually move towards, more traditional, less connected ways to connect. And so I think there's this really interesting opportunity there. And I think there's this notion of, like, what is, to your point earlier, what is a party, right? A party is what we make it. And a party involves the people that we want to be, close to and connect with. And what is the quote unquote social lubricant of said party? Is it coffee? Is it kombucha? Is it THC beverages? What is it? And I think this younger generation is much more open to newness, right? And I say that because, like, one of the things that I think this younger generation realized quicker than us and older generations is that a lot of what we've been told is bullskate. I almost said the actual word, right? Like, I think a lot of people realize that some of the things we've been told are half truths. And we need to find out what is the truth for as it pertains to us. And that has created this open dialogue around all the things we're talking about. Why do you drink? Why don't you drink? Why do you use cannabis products? Why don't you? Why do you go to the coffee shop? Why don't you? And all these things have just created so much more, opportunity for dialogue in the open.
I wasn't expecting to get as deep as we are on this, but I do think that you hit the head, like you hit it on the head for some stuff. One of the things that I get asked a lot, or when I'm working with let's just say older generations, is they kind of get annoyed when Gen Z is like, they ask why a lot. But it's a why because they're genuinely curious as to why that thing is happening, not because it's coming from a place of insubordination. They're just, why do we have to do that? Because they're okay with thinking about it from a completely different angle. And I think that can feel a little threatening to older generations, because they think that question is a personal attack, when in reality, that Gen Z is just like, well, why do we do this? And it puts you on your heels if you've never really thought about it. If you've never really thought about it, and they are encouraging us to think, I think, a little bit deeper and a little bit more intentionally about things. And it's percolating into so many different spaces. I see it in the workplace. I see it in higher education. I see it in all these different avenues of life. And I think we're now starting to see it spill out into community and gathering and the social space, where the desire for intention is so much higher with this generation. And so they are going to ask that like really scary why question.
Well, I agree with everything you said. And I would say that, frankly, this quote unquote insubordination is needed, right? Mm-hmm. Older generations just did what they were said to or were told to do because there was no space to question it, right? Mm-hmm. But COVID disrupted the world we live in because it disrupted the workplace. We were told we had to go to the office every day, 5 days a week from 9 to 5 for perpetuity. And then all of a sudden it couldn't happen. And people were like, well, wait a second, there's clearly other ways to do things, right? Mm-hmm. This generation, they've been able to absorb that at a magnitude that was it was a forced function. So they didn't have a choice but to absorb the ability to question things, at a larger, broader scale. And so from our vantage point, like that level of questioning has accelerated products like ours into the marketplace, because people are saying, well, why not? Right? It's not lessly why anymore. Like why? It's like, well, why not? Like, why can't we do this? Why shouldn't we do this? Why isn't this accepted? Right? Yeah. And I think it's forcing us, me, I'm 46, but so, and again, like I'm Gen X, but it's like, it's forcing people like me to say, you know what? You're right. Why not?
Mm-hmm. It's this really liberating thing. And I like to try to find a common thread in some of the things I'm learning to see if there's continuity. But I do a lot in the workplace, and people, after I talk them off the ledge of that question of why are we doing this or why not, they realize that the question that Gen Z is actually asking is, in a weird way, advocacy for the greater good. And so I know that I see this with a lot of millennial managers. They're like, well, this Gen Z just keeps asking why. And I'm like, they might actually be asking for something that could be beneficial to all of us. Just because you suffered through it doesn't mean this young person also needs to suffer through it. And I think that it's like, we can't go back in time and fix our experience, but we can acknowledge like maybe the areas that need to change. And I think that part of it is, if we reframe like this relationship to work and what we're handed down, and then this relationship of socializing, and we're told you get up, you do your job from 9 to 5, you crush coffee all day, which is probably not good for your anxiety. You might eat at your desk, and then at 5 you're all going to go to happy hour, where you're probably going to have too many drinks and like one total wonton as an appetizer between you all. Then you're going to go home and try to start your day again. And like, I think this generation looked at it and said, man, there's just so many touch points throughout my day that don't feel like they're aligning with me as a whole person. And then when they ask the question, we're all like, but that's what I did, and you should have to do it too. And that is, I think, a very silly approach to things.
Yeah, it really is. One of the questions that I'm getting better at asking, and I encourage everyone who, either has children or manages people or frankly manages themselves, is to ask them the question, well, what would you do differently? Mm-hmm. Because that right there may be your unlock as to how is this generation, how is this young person sitting across from me, how do they think about it? right? Like I even struggle with my own children, right? A 14, soon to be 15-year-old and 18, soon to be 19-year-old is like, because that's what it was like when I was a kid. Well, that
Mhm.
doesn't suffice anymore. So giving space and creating space for this dialogue around change and, the change that is actually better, to your point, of for the greater good, that's what we all ultimately want, right? We want
Mhm.
flexibility. We want this interchangeability between, archetypes and lifestyle types, and that filters into product types, right?
Mhm.
Is I don't we our company doesn't advocate for don't drink at all. Like I say it jokingly to our distribution partners all over the country. It's not that we're not anti-alcohol. I was a professional drinker. I was great at it. We're actually just saying, like, look, let's give consumers choice. Let's let
Mhm.
meet them where they are in this new wave of consumption. Maybe we're not going to go out and go on a bender every, Thursday, Friday, Saturday like we used to. Maybe we're just going to go out and have a couple glasses of wine or a couple beers or a couple cocktails, but we want to have NA options at the.
Mhm.
Some of those NA options might be straight non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic cocktails. Some of them may be non-alcoholic intoxicants, i.e., cannabis products. Like,
Mhm.
let's build a better world and provide optionality to this new wave of consumers.
Yeah, I'll never forget the time that I got a non-alcoholic option with my friends. I was like, I ordered last, and everyone was like, "You didn't get like an alcoholic option." I was like, "Well, the juice sounded really good in this one, and I didn't actually want the alcohol to ruin my juice." And they were like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "I guess I could have just ordered some juice, but this also looked nice." And I was like, I still had a drink later in the day, but I think it does. It puts people on their heels. And I was like, but I'm not saying y'all can't have anything. Just like, I just wanted this one with the juice because it sounded really good. And that option wasn't in other alcohol or in the alcoholic beverages. And I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm going to live. You're going to live too.
Well, it's crazy that you say that, because if you think about alcohol, it's the only drug. It's the only drug that people look at you crazy when you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like people look at you. You said, "Hey, listen, you're out ordering from a menu. Can I get a hit of cocaine?" People will be like, "What?" Right? But
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, exactly. It's mind blowing to me that when you say, "Oh, I don't drink," they're like, "You don't?" It's like, wait, why not? What's wrong with me not drinking? Right? It's the same thing with THC products. Like when I go out to restaurants now, I know they don't carry them, but I ask for
Mm-hmm.
them anyways. Because what I'm doing is I'm warming up the ears of the server, the ears of the management, the ears of the bartenders to this request for a non-alcoholic intoxicant. So that
Mm-hmm.
as distribution continues to grow, as the industry continues to grow, we've started the process of destigmatizing those who will serve us these products.
Absolutely. And that's going to actually takes me right to my next question, because I do want to look ahead and I want to think about how brands, especially those in kind of emerging industries or solving new problems like cannabis and some of these THC infused beverages. But what do you think some brands can do to show up more responsibly and creatively for consumers? In meeting that problem identification or meeting that need. I think that you've been in this space for a minute, and I think that there's a lot that people can learn from your experience.
So the first thing I would say to you is you've got a lot of products, you don't have a lot of brands. Brands have soul, brands stand for something, brands message something. You've got 95% of the products you see in the market, they're soulless. And a lot of them won't be around, right? They're chasing the rising dollar for this product category. It's the fastest growing, category in intoxicants. It's the first innovations in intoxicants since prohibition. And so you've got products, you don't have brands. But that being said, it comes down to what is the transfer of value? What are you giving a consumer that makes them love you, right? So many of these products right now in this industry in particular, they're very average at best liquid at price points that are not affordable for the most consumers, right? Our brand, our go to market, our thesis is built on premium look, premium taste, value priced. I want to be the value option. And the reason for that is that communities of color are oftentimes impacted most widely by the war on drugs, aka, three strikes and you're out on marijuana, and alcoholism. And so for us, we want any consumer from any walk of life to be able to walk in to a liquor store and choose if they're going to drink Plift or if they're going to buy that 6-pack of beer, right? And in order for us to do that, we have to walk in that mission. So that's the core of our brand, right? I think to answer your question directly, these products need to figure out what do they actually do for a customer other than all the buzz, no booze. All of us give you a buzz. All of us are alcohol free. What do you provide for the customer, the consumer outside of that? Because those are not brand pillars, those are category pillars. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, you have to convince consumers why to choose you, right? I can say with 100% confidence, 99% of the people who try a Plift enjoy the flavor. And therefore they will buy it again because of the flavor. Most of the competitive set, most of the products can't say that. And so what else from an efficacy perspective or from a product, liquid and can perspective, can you provide to them outside of THC? Because if it's coming down to the intoxicant, you're not going to win a race there. There's too many other product sets, product types in the category. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of canned products right now. So how do you cut through? You got to have something outside of just THC.
Yeah, I think that there's even a deeper message there is with Gen Z of what we're seeing is you got to have something of substance too as a brand, and where they want you to talk the whole talk and walk the whole walk and do it consistently and do it ethically is what I pull from how we're seeing kind of their shift in mindset. Whether it is in the THC space or any other space, I really love that you framed it. Like there's a lot of people that do products, but they're not doing a brand because I don't think they're doing that full scale authenticity of like both the walking and the talking part and doing it wholeheartedly and authentically and expecting Gen Z to buy in. That would just be my take on it though.
I totally agree.
Well, Todd, this has been such a fascinating conversation and certainly opened up my eyes, and I'm thinking about lots of different things differently, and that's why I love having conversations like this. But before I let you go, I got one more question for you, and I think that you're going to have an interesting response to this one. But what's your favorite thing about working with Gen Z? But in your case, you're also raising some Gen Z, so it's a time to brag on the ones that you know and you love.
I think my favorite thing is this generation is such a trigger point into what our future looks like, right? They're the first generation. Like my oldest daughter is the last generation, the last, birth year that wasn't just cell phones all day long, right? She was born in 2007. And so, you know what I mean? Like we had cell phones, but they're not nearly what they are today. And so I think that they just have such an interesting perspective on the future state of where we're headed. And they also come from a place that is much more in touch with the feeling, right? Their internal compass than older generations are. And so much of the empathetic world we're going to have to move into will be dictated by this generation, right? And that's from products, that's from services, that's from how we get groceries, all the way down, right? And so it'll be interesting, and it's interesting to learn and see how they bifurcate, what we'll call creature comforts, ease of use with practicality. And so that's how I kind of look at it in totality as it pertains to my daughters in particular. Like they just have such a unique viewpoint because, they're beautiful, women of color, but because of where they grew up and how they grew up, there are people who look like them that live a mile down the road whose lives will be completely different simply because of where they grew up. The color of their skin is the exact same, but because they grew up. And so because of that, I'm doting on my daughters here. They're very much grounded in how do they stay in service of the person who looks like them that doesn't have the opportunity as them, right? And so I think that moving forward can be projected across the generation I believe.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think that what I'm hearing is this is a generation that can be empathetic and supportive to people that maybe aren't walking in the same shoes as them, which I think in their in touchness with who they are allows them to feel more connected to people, even if they don't have everything in common with them. And I think that that is going to help, hopefully, our humanity become more human, because I think there are a lot of times that we try and we don't do so good. But I think Gen Z is teaching us to do good again, and they're teaching us to ask the right questions that's going to benefit everyone. So thank you for raising good ones. I'm going to assume they're good ones, but I haven't met them, but I'm going to just assume that they're solid.
I think they're excellent. Like,
Good.
when you're raising them, you question how well you're doing and how good they will be. But as I've seen in the first week of my daughter being away from home at college, we did okay.
Good. She's going to be okay. She's going to be fine. Where is she going to college? If you're allowed to tell us.
Yeah, she goes to the University of Missouri.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I don't have any real ties to the University of Missouri, but I hope she loves it.
So far, so good.
Hope she loves it. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being here and sharing really wonderful insights. Your story is so powerful, and I love the work that you're doing in this space to help people connect more in meaningful ways. But should people want to follow along and support your journey, where can we direct them to stay up to date with you? I know you said you're too busy for social media. However,
I'm not too busy. I shouldn't. I don't spend as much time on as I should promoting the business, but if you were to follow us at Drink Plift on Instagram and TikTok. You can follow me at Todd K. Harris on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, I guess they call it nowadays.
That's what we're doing. Yep.
And Instagram as well.
Wonderful. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. But Todd, thank you again for being here. It has been just an absolute delight.
Of course. Appreciate you.
I want to thank Todd again for joining us and being so open and honest about the culture of drinking and how we're seeing this evolve with Gen Z. Before we wrap up, let's take a minute to reflect on some of the key takeaways from my conversation with Todd, because there's a lot we can carry forward into our lives. First, your why for gathering matters. Todd shared how getting honest about why he drank and what he wanted out of social experiences was a turning point. Whether you're reevaluating habits or just thinking about your weekend plans, it's powerful to ask, what do I really want from this moment? Second, rituals shape our connections. We often think of socializing as something tied to alcohol, but Todd reminded us it's really about the ritual, the shared act of holding a drink, gathering in intention, and being in community. Whether that's a coffee, a juice, a beer, or a THC-infused soda, it's the connection that counts. Third, Gen Z is redefining social norms for gathering. We know this. We've seen it. We've heard about it so far. From daytime clubbing at coffee shops to THC day parties, this generation is showing us that gathering and connection doesn't have to come with a hangover or regrets. They're asking deeper questions about why they get together and why do we do things differently. And that curiosity is shaping industries, workplaces, and how we get together. And finally, brands need soul. Todd made a strong case for building brands that stand for something. Whether you're launching a product, managing a team, or just showing up in a community, consistency, accessibility, and values-driven choices matter more than ever. Brands, especially those with products or experiences that intend to bring people together, need to have personality that's worth connecting with. This conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for you. If you want to learn more about the work Todd is doing, or you're curious about trying Plift yourself, you can follow the brand on Instagram and TikTok at drinkplift. To keep up with Todd directly, you can connect with him on LinkedIn or X. Just search for Todd K. Harris. We'll also drop those links in the show notes so you can easily follow along. Now we'd love to hear about it. So what stuck out to you? And what will you keep thinking about after this episode ends? You can share about it on Spotify in the listener comments, or you can follow, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It helps more people find these conversations and hang out with us in a meaningful way. We've had a blast this season, and we still have a few more episodes to go. However, we're always looking for new topics and insightful guests to feature. If you have a suggestion, feel free to share your thoughts using the form on my website, meghanmgrace.com/podcast. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Meghan M. Grace to keep the conversation going. I couldn't do this show without the Gen Z team behind the scenes who bring every episode to life. This episode was produced by Callie Waters and edited by Leah Kramer. Thank you again for stopping by. Let's continue this conversation, and we'll chat soon.